Overwatch 2 is literally coming in the next 24 hours, so I want to include every single piece of information that you need to know before Overwatch 2 comes out. There's a lot of juicy information that we're going to get into as we progress into the video, but first I want to get through some boring points really quickly before we get into the real meat and potatoes of the video. So I'm going to go lightning quick on this. There's a new push mode. It replaces the 2CP, aka assault maps. Your team and the enemy team compete over one payload, and whoever gets it to the end first wins. If the time/overtime runs out, the team with the most distance wins automatically. 2CP maps can still be accessed in custom games, but because of this change, the maps Panomora, Temple of Anubis, and Volskaya Industries will be removed from Overwatch 2. There will be a total of 9 new maps added into Overwatch, with 3 being the new push mode: Colosseo, Esperanga, and New Queen Street. There will be a new escort map by the name of Circuit Royale, and 2 new hybrid maps by the name of Midtown and Paraíso, which might be the wrong way to pronounce it. Besides that, there's 3 maps confirmed that we don't know the game type for, by the name of Gothenburg, India, and Shambhali Temple. Loot boxes are no longer a thing. Instead, we have a battle pass with a free version and premium version. Premium is $10, and these will have a total of 80 tiers to grind through, with a new skin rarity, Mythic, at the end, and a new hero you can unlock. We will have a battle pass for each season. We have 2 seasons confirmed so far. There'll be one on release called Season 1 and Season 2 on December 6th. Near the end of the video, you can see all the items you can get in Season 1 battle pass, but you can skip to it now with this timestamp. 6v6 is no longer a thing. It's replaced by 5v5. All game types with 5v5 will have teams that are 1 tank, 2 DPS, and 2 support. Finally, there is a promised PvE mode coming in, I believe, 2023. But now let's get into the juicy stuff. But of course, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the video, I'm Mr. Pugly, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Twitch on the top right. You have no idea how much helps me out. And let's get into the video.
Legendary? Whoa! No way!
Let's go over the new healer, tank, and DPS heroes, tips and tricks to optimize your plays. We'll be starting with Kiriko, since she is the most fresh and least known about hero mechanically wise. First things first, let's go over her healing Ofuda, which is her healing tags. That is going to be the primary way that you heal with this hero. For the remainder of this explanation, I will be referring to healing Ofuda as tags. It takes 1 second to use all the tags, and each tag heals for 13 HP. Every single time you use a tag, you actually use a total of 2 tags. So every single time you throw out a tag, you heal 26 HP, assuming it connects. It takes 0.5 seconds to reload all your tags passively, so you don't need to press the reload button to reload your tags. When you send out the tags, they will always be blue unless you are pointing at someone, in which case it will be yellow. Yellow means that they are homing towards a player. Based on current gameplay, it doesn't appear that tags can be blue then turn into yellow, which means that if they aren't yellow right away, they will not heal someone and just keep moving forward until they disappear. So you need to keep a constant eye on who you're pointing to heal them. Tags will be destroyed on terrains, which means that it turning yellow and homing onto your target doesn't guarantee a heal. It could hit a piece of terrain before it connects with the player. When you connect with all your tags, you heal for a total of 130. She has a maximum of 10 tags, and you have a healing rate of 130 healing per 1.5 seconds if you take into account the reload time. Next is going to be her secondary fire, which is her kunais. She throws kunais that are able to deal up to 3 times more damage on headshot. So with regular damage, it does 40 damage, and on headshot, it does 120. Because of this, you can deal tons and tons of damage with Kiriko, but most pro level players aren't even able to get headshots all the time. So don't expect to see tons and tons of kills with Kiriko unless you are very lucky or super good at aiming. You have a maximum ammo of 12. The reload time on your kunais is 0.8 seconds, and overall is a very good secondary fire for a support character. If you play your cards right, you can deal the same amount of damage or even more damage than most DPS characters. The rate of fire of your kunais is 1 shot per 0.55 seconds. She has the ability Protection Shuzu, which upon impact, allies in the area become briefly invulnerable for 0.75 seconds and are cleansed of most negative effects. This has an arching projectile, which means that if it's from a faraway distance, you do have to angle your shot. The Suzu can be destroyed by D.Va's defense matrix, Orisa's javelin throw, and of course Sigma's kinetic grasp. Protection Shuzu, if it hits an enemy, will knock them back briefly, and if you apply Shuzu on you, you can walk through Junkrat's trap, and you can walk through Rein's pin ability. If you are stuck in either Junkrat's trap or pinned by Reinhardt, Shuzu will not break you out of it. This ability does not work on any constructs or turrets such as Torbjorn's or Symmetra's turrets, and currently we know that this can cleanse Sleep Dart, Biotic Grenade, the Dynamite on Ashe, Junker Queen's Rampage or Wound effects, aka her damage over time ability, which we will discuss when we go over Junker Queen, Mei's Blizzard, Reinhardt's Earth Shatter, and Sombra's Hack, so pretty much most CCs. This has a cooldown of 14 seconds, and when you use it, it heals instantly for 50 HP. She has the ability to teleport to any enemy that she sees with the ability Swift Step, which is going to be your left shift if you're on PC, which has a max range of 30 meters and a cooldown of 7 seconds. Swift Step can be used across walls, which means you could be looking at an ally that is perhaps in a building and you could teleport directly towards them as long as you're within the max range of 30 meters or less. This can be used on airborne targets, but as soon as you teleport to them, you will immediately fall. Of course, this teleport ability cannot be used in Junkrat's Steel Trap or Sigma's or Zarya's ultimate. Her teleport ability also cleanses most effects. For an example, if Junker Queen hits you with her ult and applies the anti-heal ability on you, you can remove it with the teleport ability, but you cannot remove Ana's Biotic Grenade, so there's some inconsistencies. She also has the passive ability, just like Hanzo and Genji, of wall climb, so you can wall climb with this hero if you so wish. Most of the time you will be using your teleport ability instead of this, but the climbing wall is a nice utility if you ever need it. Because of her ability to teleport to any target very easily, as well as her homing healing, she plays really well with flanking heroes such as Tracer and Genji, as well as any heroes that could get behind the enemy team, or generally any character or player that splits from the team. Her ultimate is Kitsune Rush, which has a lot of different applications with different characters. It summons a Fox Spirit that rushes forward, accelerating your movement, attack speed, and cooldowns of all allies that are in the path. Allies in this get a movement speed increase of 50%, a fire rate increase of 25%, an increased reload time, as well as an increased cooldown rate of 60%. This has a duration of 10 seconds and it has a max range of 25 meters. The ultimate will be completely stopped by terrain, so this means it can be blocked by Mei's Ice Wall and her Cryo Freeze, since Cryo Freeze acts as a terrain, even if she is an ally. If it does go over an edge, it will deploy along the ground underneath. It does not climb walls or cover any gaps. Bob can receive the benefits of Kitsune Rush, but constructs do not, nor does Junkrat's Riptire. Interestingly enough, the cooldown reduction has some inconsistencies. Blink, Concussive Mine, and Fire Strike are all abilities with charges receive the cooldown reduction. However, Particle Barrier, Projective Barrier, and Sentry Turret, which are also abilities with charges, do not currently receive the cooldown reduction. Baptiste's Immortality Field does not benefit from the cooldown reduction, but Biotic Orbs from Moira does, even though both begin their cooldown after deployment. A really easy to understand synergy with Kitsune Rush due to the fact that you get increased cooldown rate and rate of fire. If you have a ally Bastion, they can use this to make their burst damage when they're in their tank turret mode to deal even more damage than usual, or even chase targets easier. There's tons of synergies with this ultimate, so go rampant on thoughts and ideas, maybe even tell me some in the comments below. But let's next move on to Sojourn. Sojourn is the new DPS character in Overwatch 2, and she has her primary weapon as the railgun. Both Sojourn and Soldier 76 are very similar characters, but the key difference between them is that Soldier 76 is a pure hit scan, but Sojourn railgun acts as a projectile-based gun, which means that it doesn't have any damage fall off, unlike Soldier, but it also means that her projectiles don't hit instantly. These projectiles do go in a straight line, and they have a damage of 9 damage per shot. It has a total ammo of 45. The fire rate is 14 ammo per second, and the reload time is 1.2 seconds. This, of course, can headshot. The unique property of the railgun is as you shoot targets with primary fire, you will generate energy on hit. So energy Sojourn generates from her primary fire charges up her secondary ability, which is Secondary Fire. This acts as hit scan, which means it doesn't travel at all. It instantly goes to the target, and it's a high impact shot that consumes the stored energy that we were just talking about. This has a minimum damage of 30 and a maximum damage of 130. Of course, you're at max energy. Area effect can be 0 meters to 0.1 meters fully charged. This can once again headshot, and it has 0 cooldown. Despite it having 0 cooldown, you probably shouldn't spam it unless we are using an ability later on, because the total damage per second with the secondary fire is less than if you were using your primary fire. If you do not gain any energy after 6 seconds, Sojourn's secondary fire energy will decay at a rate of 50 per second, so it only takes 2 seconds to get rid of a fully charged 100 energy with your secondary fire. Sojourn does have a movement ability by the name of Power Slide. Power Slide allows you to slide across the ground, and you can also cancel it into a super high jump. This only has a cooldown of 6 seconds, so you can use it very often, and this ability allows easy repositioning of the character due to the high jumping capability as well as the increased movement speed. During the sliding ability, you can also fire, so keep that in mind. And her next ability is Disruptor Shot. This is going to be a projectile and area of effect, and it has the ability to launch an energy shot that slows and damages enemies within it. If the enemy is dumb enough to stay in the max duration of 4 seconds, it will deal a total of 210 damage. This only has a cooldown of 15 seconds, and this cannot headshot. Hopefully that was obvious for you. It has a max range of 30 meters. Her Disruptor Shot cannot build energy, so keep that in mind. It's only your primary fire that is going to build energy for you. Unless, of course, you're using your ultimate, where your ultimate Overclock, which auto charges your railgun for a short duration of 9 seconds. This ultimate costs 2,100 points, fully refill Sojourn's energy in 1.2 seconds, which means you can spam your secondary fire a lot more often. And you will want to spam your secondary fire often with this ability, because your secondary fire now pierces through targets. So if you get lucky enough where an enemy is behind another enemy, or if you line up your shots properly, you can deal lots of damage very quickly. Sojourn is considered a difficult hero to play due to the fact that she has a high skill ceiling, due to the fact that you need a lot of accuracy to deal lots of damage or utilize her kit properly. The more effective you are, of course, with accuracy, the more suited you are to play Sojourn. At the moment, the general consensus is that Sojourn is better than Soldier 76, so keep that in mind, but that is mainly on a high player level census, so we're talking mostly pros. But take that with a grain of salt as we progress into the future of Overwatch. And the final hero will be Junker Queen, which is the tank. Unlike most tanks, this tank prefers to get into close combat with enemy heroes, because most of her abilities have either short ranges or gets enemies closer to her, and she has an aggressive playstyle where the more damage you deal, the more you will be healed from most of her abilities. Junker Queen has an HP of 425. This is a pretty low amount for HP, but it is counteracted by her abilities, as we'll discuss in just a little bit. So first, let's go over her passive ability. She heals from all damage over time effects, which are inflicted by her keyword wounds. This passive ability is called Adrenaline Rush. Wounds can be applied with 3 of her abilities, including one of her ultimates. So you're going to be applying and getting this effect very often. Her primary weapon is a shotgun by the name of Scattergun. The Scattergun is very similar to Roadhog's secondary fire, but it is more accurate. Depending on the amount of pellets that you actually hit on the target, you can deal upwards to 80 damage or more. The fire rate is 1 shot every 0.8 seconds, and the ammo count is 6, as well as your reload time being 1.5 seconds. This, of course, can headshot. Her next ability, Jagged Blade, is going to be an ability that you use very often because it has a short cooldown of 6 seconds, and it brings enemies towards you after you get the blade into them. Her knife ability is able to travel through walls, so if it's inside a building or across a wall, you can recall it and the enemy in front of you will get the wound effect. So keep that in mind when you use this ability. Potentially you could miss throw and still get a benefit from it. When you throw it into an enemy or throw it at all, you have to reactivate it to return it. If the return blade hits a target, it will apply the wound effect, which is the damage over time ability that heals you. This cannot headshot. Most of the time you will want to use this ability to bring enemies closer to you, but if you position it correctly, you can use it to mass wound a large amount of enemy heroes, which can heal you a lot. The impact damage is 80 and the wound damage is 15. Her next ability doesn't apply wounds, but it also is a very helpful tool for you and your allies by the name of Commanding Shout. This increases your HP by 200 and nearby allies' HP by 50. And it makes everyone affected by this ability have increased movement speed of 30%, which is very valuable in a lot of team fights, as you know if you play a lot of Overwatch, considering Lucio is commonly top meta, but that's a discussion for another video. It has a max range of 15 meters and has a duration of 3 seconds. It has a cooldown of 15 seconds, and the temporary HP does not decay over its duration. It used to in the past. Her next ability is another ability that can apply wound by the name of Carnage. You swing your axe to wound all enemies in front of you, dealing damage over time, which is the wound. The impact damage is 90 and the wound is 40. Once again, all wound damage heals you, so if you damage 2 characters, you will deal 80 wound damage as well as the impact damage, thus healing you for 80 HP. This has a max range of 5 meters and only a cooldown of 8 seconds, so you'll be using this often and it is encouraged to use it often. And finally, her ultimate is Rampage. It takes 2,520 points to fully charge this ultimate, and it makes the player charge forward and wound enemies, dealing damage over time and preventing them from being healed. The total damage it can do with Rampage on hit is 100, which is wound damage, so it's damage over time, so it's not an immediate 100 damage. But of course, since it's wound damage, you are going to be healing for a 1-to-1 ratio of the wound damage. The area of effect is 5 meters, the duration is 5 meters, and is generally a really good ability to get into the fray very quickly, or even to just heal you very quickly as well. You will want to play smart when playing Junker Queen. Junker Queen does have a decently mid to high skill ceiling, which means if you play super recklessly, you will die very easily. What changes a bad to good Junker Queen is using her abilities to get reckless, to potentially get kills, or heal her for a considerable amount without dying in the process. It's very easy to get to short range and thus die very easily against some matchups, so make sure to be cautious on what heroes you use your abilities on. For example, your Carnage ability, which is swinging axe ability, should be used against targets such as Reinhardt or Doomfist, which naturally get up close to you, but you shouldn't go into a 1v5 situation just to use Carnage because you would die very easily, which is a bit obvious, but you wouldn't believe how many people make that mistake. There's a total of 9 global changes that are going to be accompanying you as you play Overwatch 2. The first one is going to be players will now retain 30% of their ultimate charge when switching to a different hero. This used to be a passive exclusively for DPS roles, but now this is a role for every single character in the game. Speaking of roles, there's going to be a role for each character type, so damage, support, and tanks are going to have their own roles. Damage heroes now gain a 25% movement and reload buff for 2.5 seconds with every single elimination on an enemy player. Unfortunately, this does not stack, but if you were to kill a target during this 2.5 duration, it will refresh. Tanks will have a 30% knockback resistance and provide a 50% less ultimate charge when damaged, which means that you can't unfortunately fill up on your ultimate by just going over and shooting a Roadhog over and over and over like I would with a Reaper. All supports now have the passive healing that was exclusive to Mercy, which is the 15 HP per second after not being damaged for 1.5 seconds. All forms of extra health from abilities, for example like Sound Barrier, will now be considered over health, which isn't considered health, shield, or armor. Instead, it has its own property. Over health reduces ultimate charge gained by opponents by 50% when damaged. Speaking of health bars, armor health now reduces all damage dealt by 30% instead of flatly reducing the damage by 5% post-add. This means that a given pool of armor always blocks the same amount of damage no matter how it is depleted. For example, Brig and Torg's pool of 50% armor will always block 15 damage. And that's going to be all the global changes for the heroes in Overwatch 2. Next, let's go in alphabetical order and start with Ana. Anna's ammo count is going to be increased from 12 to 15 rounds. Anna's sleep dart cooldown is now 12 to 15 seconds, more than likely to account for it being one of the only CCs in the entire game right now. Anna's biotic grenade duration has been reduced from 4 to 3 seconds, which is the anti-heal debuff, which allows you not to heal your allies. Next, let's go over to Ashe. Ashe only has one change where Bob's health was basically reduced from 1200 to 1000. Next, let's go over to Baptiste. Baptiste biotic launcher primary fire damage was increased from 24 to 25, and the damage fall off was increased from 20 to 25 meters. Baptiste's regenerative bursts now heals for 50 HP instantly and 50 over time. And his alternate fire, which is his healing grenades, was increased from the ammo count 10 to 13. Bastion is one of the few heroes that got completely reworked for Overwatch 2, and basically all you need to know, configuration sentry and tank was removed, unfortunately, as well as the self-healing, but his walking around mode, which is his recon mode, his damage was increased from 20 to 25, which is a good buff, as well as his weapon spread being reduced from 1.2 to 0, which means he's going to be extremely accurate. His fire rate was reduced from 8 to 5, as well as his ammo count being reduced from 35 to 25. But he also gained the ability Configuration Assault. This allows Bastion to transform into a tank and fire his minigun while moving. It reduces his movement speed by 35%, but it lasts 6 seconds and has a 12-second cooldown. Bastion has infinite ammo while this is active. An overall positive change, personally, I think, with Bastion. I feel like we're going to see him use it a lot more because of this. He also gained the ability to throw out a grenade that can bounce off walls and stick to enemies, and also it does a total of 130 damage. With a moderate knockback, this has an 8-second cooldown. Because the tank was reduced and reworked into a regular ability of his ultimate is now changed to artillery. This ultimate allows Bastion to fire 3 artillery shells anywhere on the map, which deals over 200 damage for each shell. I feel like COD players are going to have PTSD with the kill streaks on that. While he also has his Ironclad passive is enabled again, which means he gets 20% damage resistance while in the assault mode, which is the maneuvering tank ability, as well as his new artillery mode. Overall, going to be a very nice burst damage hero now. Next, we go over to Brigitte. Shield Bash no longer stuns enemies because they wanted to remove most CCs in the game, but her cooldown was reduced from 7 to 5 seconds, and the distance traveled from the Shield Bash was increased from 7 to 12 meters. The movement is no longer stopped when impacting barriers, and damage was increased from 1 to 50, and the knockback was doubled. You're basically getting no stun for about 4 to 5 buffs, so that is a good buff to Brigitte right there. Next, her Inspire also triggers off the Shield Bash damage, which is excellent, but her Inspire duration was reduced from 6 to 5. Next is going to be Cassidy, aka McCree. I'm going to call him McCree for the remainder of this section. His flashbang was unfortunately removed, but McCree now gains a magnetic grenade. This ability will stick to enemies and explode, dealing up to 131 damage. It also homes towards nearby targets as they try to get away, which is very good. His Fan the Hammer alt firing mode fire rate was increased by 7.5%, which is a mouth doozy. His combat roll now grants a 50% damage reduction when used, which could be a very nice tool to mitigate damage. His Deadeye ultimate gains 40% damage reduction as well as giving a maximum duration increase from 6 to 7. Deadeye also builds at 130 damage per second for 2 seconds and then ramps up to 260 damage per second. Deadeye ultimate cost has been also increased by 10%, which is a small nerf overall for the amount of buffs we just got. Next is going to be the first tank that we talk about, which is D.VA. D.VA's turtle mech health was increased from 600 to 650, whereas she has 300 armor and her normal health is 350. Her primary fire doesn't give as big as a movement speed penalty anymore. It is decreased from 50 to 40%, which means you're going to be going faster, which is excellent, as well as her weapon spread being reduced from 4 to 3.5, which means it will be a lot more accurate. Her boosters now have an impact damage of 25 as opposed to 10, and her micro missiles cooldown was reduced from 8 to 7 seconds, as well as her calm mech ultimate being reduced by 12%. So lots of buffs for D.Va. We're going to see her beat a lot faster and getting her abilities out there quicker. It's a really nice change to see her impact damage be increased by 25 because you can already deal some nasty damage if you cancel it with a melee. I'm excited to see how quickly we can kill squishy characters with D.Va now. Next is going to be Doomfist. Now Doomfist was changed quite significantly. Doomfist is no longer a DPS, he is now a tank. Because he is a tank, he has some new abilities as well as some reworks to his abilities to make him more of a tank overall, as well as getting a base HP increase from 250 to 450. His rising uppercut has been removed from the game, which means you can no longer throw enemies up in the air, which is a big sad face for me. His hand cannon damage was reduced from 6 to 5 per pellet, which is a small nerf, but his ammo regen rate was increased from 0.65 seconds to 0.4 seconds, which means you're going to get your ammo regen quicker. His rocket punch impact damage was reduced from a maximum 100 damage to a maximum 30 damage. His wall slam damage is also reduced from a maximum of 150 to 40 damage. His maximum charge up rate for this punch is reduced from 1.4 to 1 second. Impacting target now causes a secondary larger cone area to grab extra targets, dealing damage and knockback to them as well, which means this is primarily not going to be your damaging tool, instead a nice CC tool to mess up the enemy's team composition. He also gained the ability Power Block, which allows Doomfist to block 80% of incoming damage, but reduces his movement speed by 35%. Blocking up to 90 damage or more will empower your rocket punch with 50% more damage and 50% more speed, as well as 50% more distance, a larger secondary knockback area effect, and an additional 1 second to the stun after the target hits the wall, assuming you fully charge it. His Seismic Slam ability now launches you up and sends you towards the area that you were pointing, and it can also be cancelled by pressing the action ability again. His ultimate no longer causes a knockback, but all enemies hit by the ability are slowed by 50% for 2 seconds, which is awesome. His cast time was reduced from 1 to 0.5 seconds, and the damage was also nerfed around the radius of the meteor strike to 15 to 100, depending on how close they are to the epicenter. But the epicenter, aka the center, will still deal 300 damage to targets. Echo's Focusing Beam maximum DPS was reduced from 200 to 175. Her ultimate Duplicate now has a cap for the max HP, so if you were to copy a tank that has up to 600 or more HP, she will only have a maximum of 300 HP, so keep that in mind. And then we have Genji, which received no changes because he's perfect. Hanzo only has one change, where his Storm Arrow damage was reduced from 70 to 75 per arrow. Junkrat's frag launcher projectile was increased from 0.2 to 0.25, which means you'll have an easier time hitting random targets or just hitting your target in general. His steel trap was also increased damage wise from 80 to 100, and his projectile speed of his steel trap was increased from 10 to 15, which means you can launch it farther. Lucio only has 2 changes, where his ultimate cost was reduced by 12% and his crossfade self-healing penalty was increased from 30 to 60%. So you heal yourself less with your own healing, which is fair because you heal yourself passively with the support hero role. Mei has quite the controversial change in my opinion. Her primary fire no longer stuns enemies, instead it only slows targets by a constant 50% instead of building over time, so just spraying the enemy once will slow them immediately by 50%, which is nice. The slow duration is only 0.5 seconds, and damage per second was actually increased from 55 to 100, which is a great buff. Her ammo was increased from 120 to 150 as well. Her Cryo Freeze no longer blocks Zarya's or Sigma's ultimate, and her Ice Pillar health was reduced from 400 to 250, as well as the range being reduced from 35 meters to 20 meters. And her Blizzard ultimate was increased by 15%. Seeing as Mercy already had a passive healing passive, they instead allowed her to have a new passive which increases the self-healing from the support role by 50%. Mercy will receive 22.5 HP per second. Her Guardian Angel ability, which is that ability that allows you to rush towards your allies, now has the additional perk of when you press crouch, you will be launched up into the air, which is very similar to Mercy hopping. You can now charge the ability. The more you charge, the higher up you will jump with the crouch ability, or it also has a secondary effect where if you cancel it while also pressing backwards, you will be launched backwards, which is very cool. As well as the Guardian Angel now having the ability when you jump, instead of jumping in the trajectory that you are going, you will jump towards the direction you're actually looking, which is going to make her a lot more slippery and a lot more engaging to play in my opinion. Her Angelic Descend, which allows her to slowly go down while in the air, can also be used to slow the ascent from the Mercy crouch jumping as well. Her Healing Orb capacity was decreased from 300 to 250, and her Healing Orb cooldown was increased from 8 to 10. Her Biotic Grasp self-healing was decreased from 24 to 20 per second, and her Fade cooldown was increased from 6 to 7. Moira can no longer use Fade to escape Zarya's or Sigma's ultimate. Orisa has a new rework, which is going to completely change the way Orisa players play. Her Protective Barrier is no longer in the game. Her Halt was removed, as well as her Supercharger ultimate being removed. Her base armor was increased from 200 to 275, and her base HP was increased from 200 to 275 for a total HP of 550. Her weapon is now Augmented Fusion Driver. This weapon deals 12 damage per shot, has a critical hit bonus of 100%, and a damage fall off of 15 to 25 meters. This weapon no longer has a magazine, instead it can overheat, and when you overheat it, it cannot be fired for 3 seconds. Fortify now provides 125 overhealth. It also reduces the heat buildup on her primary fire by 50% when active. Its duration is 4.5 seconds. She gained the ability Energy Javelin. This ability allows Orisa to throw an energy javelin that deals 60 damage, stuns enemies for 0.2 seconds, and knocks them back 6 meters. If an enemy collides with a wall when struck with the javelin, they take an additional 40 damage and are stunned for an extra 0.3 seconds. This has only a 6-second cooldown, which is very nice. She also gained the ability Javelin Spin, where Orisa rapidly spins her javelins for 1.75 seconds, destroying enemy projectiles. This spinning ability increases her movement speed while moving forward up to 60% and increases her movement speed for going forward 20% for 2 seconds after it ends. During this ability, she'll push back enemies and deal up to 90 damage. This only has a 7-second cooldown, and she also gains a new ultimate. This ultimate pulls in enemies and gains the effect of Fortify, dealing an area of effect attack over 4 seconds of charging. Releasing the attack deals up to 500 damage if fully charged, and while the attack is charging, Terra Surge deals minor damage to nearby enemies, as well as decrease their movement speed. You're going to be pulling them in, slowing them down, and dealing damage, and then releasing a large amount of damage. You will more than likely release it midway through, because most enemies or most players will be smart enough to get out of the area or potentially use an ability to jump out, which means you'll rarely see the 500 damage. Pharah only has 2 changes. Her rocket launcher reload starts 0.25 seconds faster when out of ammo, and her Concussive Blast now deals 30 damage if you hit him directly, as well as dealing double the knockback if you get a direct hit on an enemy. Reaper's primary fire is the only thing that was changed. His shotgun damage pellets were reduced from 6 to 5.4, and his spread was increased from 6 to 7, which means you're going to be a lot more inaccurate. Also, his Wraith form can no longer escape Zarya's or Sigma's ultimate. His passive Steadfast was removed, which reduced his knockback, but it's replaced by the Tank Roll passive, which already has knockback resistance. His base armor was increased from 200 to 300, and his base HP was increased from 300 to 325, making his total HP pool 625. His barrier's health was reduced from 1,600 to 1,200, and the regeneration rate was reduced from 200 to 144 health per second, which is a technical overall buff to his regenerative abilities, but due to the fact that his shield is less HP, but the less HP does hurt a little bit. His charge is now able to steer a lot better, with its turn rate being increased by 50% and can now manually be cancelled whenever you want. The charge pin while impact was reduced from 300 damage to 225 damage, and the cooldown was reduced from 10 to 8 seconds. His Fire Strike now has 2 charges and deals 100 damage. His Fire Strike now has 2 charges, but only deals 90 damage as opposed to 100. Roadhog's Take a Breather healing was increased from 300 to 350, but his whole hog has been changed entirely. It now can be fired manually, but it cannot be cancelled by stuns, which is great. Additionally, Roadhog can use other abilities while Whole Hog is active, which means you can be using your ultimate and chain enemies nearby. Sigma got a buff to his HP where his base shields was increased from 100 to 200 on his HP pool, and his acceleration damage was increased from 70 to 100. His experimental barrier regeneration rate was reduced, unfortunately, from 120 to 100. Soldier 76 primary fire is now reduced from 20 to 18, and his ultimate tactical visor no longer removes damage fall-offs. Those players can still score headshots when the ultimate is active. Sombra has quite the significant amount of changes in Overwatch 2 and feels a lot better to play as. To begin, let's first talk about her hack ability, which has the most significant amount of changes. Sombra can now hack during her stealth without ending the stealth ability, but after hacking, she's revealed for 0.75 seconds. She deals 40% more damage to hack targets, and hack targets are now able to be seen through walls by your allies for 8 seconds. Her hacking cooldown was reduced from 8 to 4 when hacking enemies or HP packs. Her cast time was increased from 0.65 seconds to 0.85 seconds, and hacking HP packs only has a duration of 30 seconds as opposed to 60. Her ability lock duration was reduced from 5 seconds to 1.75 seconds, and interrupting the hack during her channel time now invokes the full cooldown. Her hack stuns Bob for only 2 seconds as opposed to 5, and her hack also destroys Baptiste's immortality field. Her stealth fade in transition is reduced by 50%, but her detection radius was increased from 2 to 4 meters, which means you will be able to be detected a lot easier by targets, which is negligible considering everything else we got from Sombra. Her machine gun damage was reduced from 8 to 7, but the spread was reduced by 10%, which means you're going to be more accurate. Her EMP no longer gets rid of shields on targets, but instead it now deals 40% of the current enemy's HP, which is a great buff in my opinion. Symmetra's weapons ammo was increased from 70 to 100, and her primary fire no longer generates ammo when damaging barriers. Her secondary fire projectile speed was increased from 25 to 50, and her secondary fire max damage was reduced from 120 to 90 damage, which equates to 45 impact and 45 explosion damage. Her secondary fire max charge projectile size was increased from 0.4 to 0.5, and her secondary fire ammo cost was increased from 7 to 10, which isn't a decrease or increase at all since her maximum ammo is now 100, so it's a net nothing. Her secondary fire charge time was reduced from 1.2 seconds to 1 second, which means you're going to be firing faster with that ability. And her teleporter now builds a lot quicker, where instead it builds in 1 second as opposed to 2 seconds. Her teleporter has a maximum lifetime of 10 seconds, and her cooldown for that was increased from 10 to 12 seconds, which starts when the teleporter is placed. The HP was reduced from 300 to 200, which makes her teleporter have 50 HP and 150 shields, and the range was reduced from 30 to 22. Her sentry turret travel speed was increased from 15 to 20, and the movement speed reduction on targets being hit by turrets is 15% per turret as opposed to 20%. The only change to Torbjorn is his primary gun, where his primary fire recovery rate was reduced from 0.6 to 0.55 seconds, and the secondary fire recovery rate was reduced from 0.8 to 0.7 seconds, which is fancy terms for a faster fire rate on both primary fire and secondary fire. Tracer only received 1 nerf, where the damage of her pellets was reduced from 6 to 5, which is a significant nerf to Tracer's 1-clip potential. Widowmaker's HP is now 200 as opposed to 175, which is how it used to be back in the day in Overwatch 1. Winston's base armor was increased from 150 to 200. His Tesla cannon now has a secondary fiery mode, which can be used to charge up and release a jolt of electricity that goes up to 30 meters in range. It deals up to 50 damage and costs up to 12 ammo. His barrier HP was increased and the duration was reduced from 9 to 8 seconds, but the cooldown was also reduced from 13 to 12 seconds. and his ultimate cost was increased by 20%. Wrecking Ball's base armor was increased from 100 to 150, his adaptive shield radius was increased from 8 to 10 meters, and his HP gain per target was increased by 75 to 100, and the knockback on his roll was increased by 36%. Next up is Zarya. Her base HP was increased from 200 to 250, and her base shields was increased from 200 to 225, which making her total HP 475. Her self-shielding ability and the shielding of allies now have the same charges. It has a total of 2 charges and has a 10-second cooldown. The cooldown now begins immediately on ability use instead of when the barrier expires. The barrier duration was increased from 2 to 2.5 seconds. Allies targeted with the barrier cannot be targeted again by the same ability for 2 seconds. Her energy degeneration was increased from 1.8 to 2.2 per second, which means you're going to lose your energy charge quicker. And then finally we have Zenyatta. Zenyatta's base shields was decreased from 175 to 150. His Orb of Discord time to fall off targets when not in line of sight was reduced from 3 to 2 seconds, and he gained the ability Snap Kick, which is a passive to Zenyatta's melee, which means his melee deals 50% more damage, 45 instead of 30 baseline, and knocks back enemies significantly. We're going to be showing you every single item that's in the Season 1 Battle Pass for Overwatch 2. There's only 3 new things that you need to learn about. Player cards, which is a new item that allows you to put a background to your player name. There's going to be weapon charms, which is just a nice little charm on the weapon of your character, as you see right here, as well as souvenirs, which is going to be a universal emote that is usable with any character. It takes 10,000 EXP to go up a tier in the Battle Pass, which means that is 4 to 5 matches. And without further ado, I'm Mr. Pugly, and I hope you enjoy this video.
You can be improved.
Somebody has to stand up for the people.
Perhaps we only exist in the memory of a person now gone.
Wait till you see me on my bike.
Watch your step. It's a long way down.
This is my neck of the woods.
It's all connected.
High-tech, low-tech, we all die in the end.
You are parts, and I am whole.
With these upgrades, they don't stand a chance.
The dragon and I are one.
I run with blades all the time. Ooh, I do love neon.
I do not cower in the presence of evil.
As always, let me thank the members who make these videos possible. We have Clairvoyance, Rick and Glacius, Grey Wolf, Cameron, Wishkeeper, and Kala Doctor. These are the members on Patreon or YouTube who support me as little as $5 a month, and you can also support me as little as $5 a month by clicking the link in the comments or description or on the top right to become a member. The more members we have, the closer I get to becoming full-time, which of course means more videos for you guys. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.
And the last shall be first to immerse in a pass out heat, facing him out with a moxie melt till he woke up drowning in tchotchke hell. War in a cave with a torch on the wall, then a window arrangement of porcelain dolls.